book, and we stopped at the pillars, the essentials for marriage. And the scholars say that the Arkan, the pillars for a valid marriage, are three. Now, you remember we said that there are what is known as pillars, there are conditions, and there are other things that are mandatory in the nikah, in the marriage. So the pillars that without the marriage would be invalid are as follows. The first one is to have the marriage taking place without having any obstacles. So the two parties, the wife and the husband, should be free of any reason that prevents a marriage. And we spoke about that earlier when we were talking about the conditions of marriage. Such obstacles would be that they are siblings. The man and the girl were breastfed by the same woman, for example, with the conditions, of course, known as we will come and discuss later on, inshallah. Marrying a woman while being married to her niece or to her aunt. This is not permissible. The Prophet ﷺ prohibited combining between a woman and her niece. Marrying two sisters. This is not permissible, as mentioned in the Quran in chapter 4, Surah An-Nisa. Marrying someone who is of a different religion that we cannot marry from. So a man cannot marry a Hindu woman, a Buddhist, an atheist. He can only marry a Muslim, a Jew, or a Christian woman. And a Muslim woman cannot marry anyone who's not Muslim. So all of these are obstacles that prevent marriage from taking place. The second pillar is what is known as proposal. And the proposal happens from the woman's guardian. And we said that the guardian is the father. And we mentioned that this is one of the conditions of marriage, to have a guardian. But we have a guardian, a pillar of nikah, of marriage, that the guardian gives a proposal by saying, I give you my daughter in marriage. In the conditions we said proper identification. So if he has 5 daughters, saying I give you my daughter in marriage is not valid. He has to identify the eldest, the youngest, her name, by a description that cannot be ambiguous. This is known as a proposal. In Arabic it's called ijab. And the third pillar is acceptance, al-qabul. And this is done by the groom or those who represent him. Now, in the midst of COVID-19, a lot of marriages have been postponed and delayed due to lack of travel, due to, the reasons. So I get a lot of calls from a brother and a sister living in America, and the father is in India or in Africa, and they cannot travel to conduct the marriage. So can they do it through Skype? So the father calls the boy and he says, I give you my daughter in marriage. and he names his daughter, the groom must say, I accept her marriage to myself. So this acceptance is a must. Now, in your textbooks, you will find this last phrase after mentioning these three pillars. It says, the commitment must precede the acceptance, meaning that the guardian of the girl has to say, I give you my daughter in marriage. I give you my sister in marriage. And the groom says, I accept. If it was reversed by the groom going and saying, uncle, I would like to marry your daughter Fatima, and the guardian says, son, I give you my daughter Fatima in marriage, according to our textbook, this is not valid and it is not accepted. Yet this is not the most authentic opinion. Saying it is not accepted is the opinion of the Hanbali school of thought follow. And saying that it is accepted, regardless who initiated it, is the opinion of the vast majority of schools of thought. And I am inclined to that opinion simply because the Quran and the Sunnah support it. As for the Sunnah, in an authentic hadith, a man was in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. When a woman came, stood in front of the Prophet ﷺ and said, O Prophet of Allah, I give myself to you in marriage. Now, this is known in Arabic, the one who gave herself to the Prophet in marriage. Al-Wahiba, nafsaha. The Prophet looked at her and looked elsewhere, showing that he's not interested. A man stood up and said, O Prophet of Allah, if you don't want to marry her, then let me marry her. So the Prophet asked him how much he has to offer as a dowry, etc. Then the Prophet said, I give her to you in marriage. The Prophet was the guardian. So the man's proposal, or shall we say the man's acceptance, preceded the proposal of the Prophet ﷺ, which supports the opinion of the majority of schools of thought that in normal cases, when we go to propose to a woman in her house, so all the men come from the boys' side and the men from the girls' side are sitting, her uncles, brothers, etc. Then they speak. If this is an engagement, they would say, we are interested in your girl. And they would say, you are more than welcome. End of story. Acceptance of engagement, proposal, but not marriage. But if the man says to the girl's father, uncle, I want to marry your daughter Aisha, and the father says, you are more than welcome, my son, I accept. This is valid, and it's a happy marriage. Of course, in the presence of two Muslim male witnesses. And some schools of thought insist on using special terminologies. So they say you have to say أنكحتك ابنتي or زوجتك ابنتي. And he responds by saying قبلت نكاحها قبلت زواجها. And they say that if you use any other terminology, this is not valid. And this is not true. If you propose in English, son, I'd like to give you my sister in marriage or daughter in marriage, and the man says, whoa, that's cool, I'm all for it. That's the job. He doesn't have to say قبلت نكاحها or accept marrying her. Any statement of approval does the job, insha'Allah azza wa jalla.